Hello, everyone. I am Valerie Estelle Frankel, and I have written a book on the villain's journey for McFarland Publisher, coming late 2021, I believe. And let's take a look at the villain's journey. Here we have a lot of famous villains who have very cool arcs. It's worth noting that the majority of fictional villains do not go on the villain's journey. They already have been on it. What we see in most TV, movies, books is a fully formed villain who's already there, already evil, and only acts in the story to harass the good character. Darth Vader in the original trilogy does not have very much of an arc. He's already a fully formed villain. It takes the prequels for us to actually see his descent from good little hero kid to tyrant and murderer of the innocent. So that's the story I'm talking about. Not original trilogy Vader, but prequel Vader, or perhaps the entire 6-movie cycle as his arc. And we are getting more actual villain stories nowadays. We've got parodies like Despicable Me and Megamind for the little kids. And we've got all the Joker, Maleficent, those kind of movies where we actually examine what the villain is up to and what made the villain this way, and so on and so forth. There are also the villains who sit there and have their short monologue about what made them a villain and why they had such a tragic life, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the full backstory. We want to spend some serious time, at least a whole TV episode, on what made this villain the way they were and how they managed to fall into evil. So let's take a look at that. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is close to the villain's journey. You can match it up step by step, but of course this is a descent into darkness. Their call is dark, their mentor is dark, they have different friends, they have different goals, and the shadow gets very interesting. So let's keep going. All right, so we've got our villain growing up in a world where he's not understood, a world where he is the monster, the outcast, the unloved character. We've got the Phantom of the Opera. We've got horrible experiences in young Magneto's life, young Raven's life. We've got Kilgrave with his horrible parents. I'll move my thing off the picture. We've got Thanos, who witnesses the destruction of a world. We've got so many created beings and monsters who never feel a part of society. And we've also got some very privileged characters. But either way, the character has a vision for how he wants to reshape society that this tough life has taught him. And he emerges, or she, women can go on this journey too, clearly, with a new vision for how to change reality. And of course, with that, we're seeing Ultron and Magneto and Thanos who walk out deciding what they want to do to the world, villainous as it is. The hero is known for having friends who have contrasting qualities to his. Friends who provide the mind, heart, and courage for Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, or something like that, who offer skills the hero doesn't have. The bad guy, the friends may provide different skills, but they're pretty much all going to be minions or people in an untrusting alliance who are going to stab them in the back. We really don't see equal friendship and love defining these characters. We see a sounding board, somebody they can boss around. And this makes sense because in the metaphor, the hero is an adolescent, a child growing into an adult. That's not true in 100% of stories, but since that's the metaphor, we see that an awful lot. It's more likely to be an adolescent than anyone else. The villain takes the role of the parent in the story, the tyrant in control of the world, the king or queen, and therefore is a fully grown adult. And the other people are often taking the role of servants, sidekicks, minions, as we can see here. And then our call to adventure in the villain's journey is a scarring. There is a terrible wounding, which is often mirrored with a physical wounding. Just about every superhero, Dr. Doom, anybody like that, I said superhero, in the superhero stories, supervillains get this horrible disfigurement, and they rise from it both physically injured and maddened into being a villain. We see this in so many Batman movies, Catwoman, Joker, the Riddler, Two-Face with the acid on his face. Any of those where they rise from that, again, not just injured, but changed into a villain. Up top, Huntsman Winter's War, her baby is killed. Next to her, the kid is going to be Killmonger from Black Panther, who sees his father taken away. It doesn't have to be a physical injury on them, but some sort of terrible wounding. We've got X-22, the Wolverine opponent below her, and then we've got Callisto, whose family house was burned down by Xena, and she rises from it, determined to destroy Xena in every way possible, of course. And yeah, we see a lot of disfigured villains, which is obviously not a polite PC way to tell our stories, but throughout all of history, there's been a big literary tradition of the villain is different looking in a way that is meant to unsettle us. All right. So, where does the villain learn to be a villain? From the evil mentor. On the bottom, of course, we see Anakin learning from future Emperor Palpatine, and we see Saruman apprenticing himself to Sauron. As Lord of the Rings explains, Saruman has been studying Sauron and the Ring so thoroughly that it corrupted him, and too much looking into what the bad guy is up to has turned him into a bad guy. Next to him, we've got Percival Graves tutoring Credence Barebone in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and poor Credence has been picked on by everybody and feels completely isolated, like Percival is the only person who will listen to him. Above them, we've got Once Upon a Time, Regina and her mother, who is twisting her and teaching her that nobody can be loved or relied on. Dark Phoenix has a dark mentor, including in the recent movie. And then we've got the Buffy vampire family, who are fun because we get to see their origin stories. And for each one, it's a corruption as somebody from the opposite sex, a vampire, seduces them, charms them, and turns them from a good human, sometimes a very, very saintly good human, into their total opposite, their total monster side. So, yeah, without the evil mentor, the scheming tyrant grandfather figure, in most cases, but not always, clearly, we wouldn't be here. Talisman. In the hero's journey, the mentor gives the hero his father's sword, or for girls, you've got a lot of talismans of perception, gazing balls, glasses, mirrors, stuff like that. Costumes, disguises, there's a very long list. The villain, as a grown adult, is more likely to construct his own talisman. And back to those supervillains again, so many of them are making their own monstrous gadgets. That's Dr. Horrible and Megamind on the bottom. All mad scientists here, for given value of mad, all constructing their own inventions as a way of saying, I don't need a mentor to do this. I don't need an experienced helper. I am the experienced helper here. And then comes the actual descent. They have a plan, they have a grudge, they have a mentor and tools, but how do they actually descend? The most common answer to that, and there are others, is the slippery slope. Just do this one little thing. It's not such a big deal. Oh, well, now that you've done that, surely you could do one more thing, and down they go. We get to see some real-time corruption in Once Upon a Time with the villains. We get a lot of backstory and flashback from them. Up in the top right corner is Babylon 5, Londo Mollari. Babylon 5 has villains, some villains that start out villainous, but Londo is fascinating because in season 1, he's a good guy, a minor character in their science fiction space station. And then we see him corrupt bit by bit as it's his ambition and his minor hatred for another race. And we see this taken advantage of as the bad guys say, okay, we will kill your enemies for you. And in exchange, all we want is a little favor. And another little favor. And another little favor. And before he knows it, he has become a leader of the villains, doing whatever they say, even as he knows how wrong it is. So many times we don't see the good guy fall in this way. And then below them, of course, is Anakin. And I wanted to pick this moment because he's still a good guy, a war hero, but there he is planning to execute his enemy Count Dooku, which, as he responds later, is not the Jedi way, is a moment of fury, just like killing all the sand people is not what he's supposed to be doing, but his mentor is sitting there egging him on, and he gives in and kills one enemy. Is this a mark of total corruption? No, but after this, it will be so much easier to kill the next one and the next one. And now we get to the shadow. The shadow is so central to the hero's journey. Basically, it's not the hero's journey if this person is not facing down their shadow, because that is the story. Your shadow is everything you've rejected from yourself and decided you don't want to be. Everything you've banished from your everything you've banished from your conscious personality and pushed into the sack of, I don't want to be like that, nice people don't do that, that's not going to be me. And then, on the hero's journey, in the darkest place of all, the hero confronts this shadow. Anakin confronts Vader, the tyrant, the killer of the innocent, the one who's using the Force for darkness, the bad Jedi, everything he decided not to be. But in this scene, at the same time, Vader is facing Luke, the young hero who's pushing at him, going, why did you become like this? Don't you remember when you used to be young and innocent? Don't you remember the voice of your inner Anakin? So that's kind of what we're looking at, the villain side of that confrontation. The most common, you do get a lot of child versus parent metaphors, like Luke and Vader, clearly, but the most common one you see are the rivals, the good brother and the evil brother, a lot of twins, the frenemies, the two who grew up together, the ones who have always been peers, the ones who have always been watching each other at every level. So here we've got some, and hero's journey scholars would say, yes, these are perfect shadows of the hero, absolutely. Loki is always there mocking and harassing Thor, and is always this little voice in the back of his head saying, you're not worthy, and so forth. But the other way to look at it, of course, as we watch these characters grow up, is Thor is Loki's shadow. Throughout his whole life, Loki has had to look at the golden boy, the perfect son, the hero, the brawn instead of brains, and the one everybody celebrates, to the point that Loki gives up and says, fine, I will be a monster, a criminal. I will be the bad guy because I'm never going to compete with the hero. And everywhere Loki goes, there's that comparison to oh so perfect Thor that's dogging him. Magneto and Professor X are each other's, as they represent two different ways to interact between the mutant and human communities, and their two philosophies that keep butting heads. The Spider-Man Trilogy, where his best friend becomes the Green Goblin, and the two of them are fighting over the same girl, and they just keep banging into each other. That's absolutely hero and shadow. Draco and Harry, Elphaba and Glinda, Buffy and Faith, any of these frenemy competitors that, again, at every stage, they're staring at each other. Hamilton and Burr in the Hamilton musical, absolutely. And so there's Callisto again, and the story keeps emphasizing Callisto could have been Xena. They have the same skills. She catches the chakram. She masquerades as Xena. You see that too, with one character taking the place of the other and stepping into their shoe, which is a classic hero, which is a classic shadow moment of becoming the other self and seeing what it's like. We see Xena and Callisto body swap. We see Buffy and Faith body swap. Yeah. And at the bottom is Megamind, and that was an interesting one. It really emphasizes this as we see the two babies' spaceships, the superhero and the supervillain, both heading toward Earth, and the supervillains lands in a prison, and the superheroes lands in a mansion, and they're leading these parallel lives. They're going to school together, and this gets really, they're fighting over the same girl. This gets really interesting because it's something we don't usually see, which is not just that the villain's telling the story, but when the hero is killed off, the villain is so desperate for him that he recreates the hero so he'll have somebody to fight. And that's something else you see, the total dependence between these two characters, because they're opposite sides of the personality, the total need to both be around. Joker in the comics, when Batman is apparently killed, sometimes he falls apart, sometimes he goes and becomes normal, because why even be Joker without Batman around? The two characters need each other so badly, especially Joker's need for Batman. So you get some really interesting things with this dynamic when the characters are fully aware how much this other person is the side of themselves that needs to exist. Frankenstein and his monster, and the monster's desperation, not just for his creator to love him, but for his creator to keep existing. And then we get to their girlfriend, sort of. All right, the anima is like Galadriel, the goddess in the forest who's helping Frodo. It's the feminine, but man's idealized feminine, the kindly mother, the perfect girlfriend, the inspiration to keep fighting, the image of woman that keeps pushing them forward. And yes, this still works in lesbian stories. This still works if we've got a girl obsessed over a boy as her perfect image of the masculine. You can totally gender flip this. But how does the girlfriend work in villain stories, is the question. The hero often is torn between the good girl and the bad girl, and pretty much he goes with the good girl. The villain occasionally has a bad girlfriend like Joker and Harley Quinn, or Skeletor and Evil Lyn. It does happen, but most often the villain is obsessed with the good girl, And usually it's the hero's good girl, which gives the two of them a reason to fight and emphasizes that they are so much the same person and want the same thing. And of course, for the villain, the anima represents the goodness that he's cut out of his life. She seems like a path to redemption, a path to the warm, loving feeling. Sometimes you see villains with a good wife who is locked away to have the children and not know anything about his nefarious business, say. So we see so many stories where the villain and the hero are fighting over the girl. We've got Lex Luthor and Lana up top in Smallville. We've got Lex Luthor and Lois Lane in other story versions. Below that, I picked not just Spike and Buffy, but Spike, and that's messed up because she is a slayer and he is a vampire, and he's an evil vampire when he first becomes obsessed with her. And he's got a very long redemption arc. But I pictured him with the Buffy bot because he invents not just the good girl, but a better good girl to hang out with, which is all kinds of psychological interestingness. Of course, below them, Kylo Ren is absolutely obsessed with Rey in every way possible. They work as shadows for each other as well as romantic interests, which is unusual but happens occasionally. Spike and Buffy also have shadow vibes of each other. We've got the Purple Man in Jessica Jones, Kilgrave, who is absolutely obsessed with Jessica, the good hero. Now, she punches holes in buses. You don't have to have a wimpy good girl, but it is this obsession between bad guy and good girl. And over on the far left, of course, Despicable Me. My point here was it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. Gru adopts the three girls and they change him, and that's the story. He can be changed by daughter figures, mom figure, wife figure. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship to be an anima. As I said, Galadriel and Frodo is a really good anima example. And of course, since the bad guy is in love or an obsession with the good girl, this is probably not going to go well. There are a few stories where she chooses the bad boy. There are more where we feel really sympathetic for the bad boy, like Phantom of the Opera, and we walk away going, are you sure you picked the most interesting choice there? But also, we see these villains frequently dangling the girl over the shark pit to torment the hero or something like that, because his love for her might change him into a good person. Arguably, that happens with Spike and Kylo Ren. And he also might not change that much and is perfectly willing to kill her to hurt the hero. But that's the romance. All right. As I said, when Luke goes and confronts Vader on his ship, the darkest, scariest place of all, this is also the moment where Vader is being confronted by Luke, the little innocent side that he thought he'd killed off long ago, but it's still there to pester him and ask why he's still being a bad guy. Therefore, a majority of confrontations do happen in the villain's stronghold. The villain does not go down to the darkest place of all because he's already been there and he already rules it. The darkest place of all, the Death Star, is his turf, and the little hero enters that. Here's the Phantom of the Opera in his lair, dragging Christine down there, and the big confrontation is in his lair, which he already owns, operates, masters. Sure. Saruman, Sauron, Hades, they all live in their central dark place, but this confrontation with the hero ideally does change them, transform them, at least have them take a good long look at what they've become. In the climax of Phantom of the Opera, Raoul, the good boy, goes down to try to save Christine from him, and the two of them are arguing, and the Phantom is the one who has the big epiphany. Raoul doesn't change that much, but the Phantom realizes how awful he's being, and that if you love Christine, you have to let her go, and he does in fact let her go. So that's a moment which is all about the villain's transformation. So when the hero goes down there, he's experiencing all the dark side stuff that's been pushed out of ordinary life. And this is the place where the villain can be strong, and yet this goodness that invades his place may corrupt it, destroy it. Sometimes we see these bad guy castles come crumbling down. Or even if the bad guy wins, at least make him pause a little and have this moment where he wrestles with his shadow. There's some Darth Vader comics where Vader is wrestling with the child voice of young Anakin who's appalled by what he's become. Or Padme, his lost love, who asks him to turn back. And he wrestles with these good guys and defeats them because the story of the comic is Darth Vader is evil and he's not going to be redeemed in this comic. But they are shadow journeys. They are moments to stop and assess and struggle with the opposite side of the self. Whatever happens. There are a few other belly of the whales that we see. Sometimes in something like Game of Thrones, where you've got a lot of rivals who are all nasty to each other, one will go to another's place of power. Sometimes we will see the villain go out into the everyday world and not only risk him or herself, but reveal that evil to the public. We've got a lot of superhero battles in the center of the city where all the civilians are at risk. In Harry Potter Book 5, Voldemort goes out to the Ministry of Magic, not just looking for something, but that is his moment to reveal to the world, not by desire, that he's back and tangle with Dumbledore, his equal and opposite. We've got the Cylons infiltrating the good guys and invading every aspect of their castle, their spaceships, in a place where they're less powerful, and they're becoming the whispers in the good guys' ears. Up top, we've got Snow White's queen, who takes her apple, which is a moment of tasting death herself, as is her disguise of the old woman, and going out to the good guys' house. And Wicked on the bottom, arguably, Elphaba is closer to the heroine's journey than the villain's journey. She isn't that villainous, even in the novel, but we see her doing a lot of confrontations at a lot of different places. She goes to the wizard's castle several times, which is the home of the patriarchy, where she has no power, and she's really going to have to struggle out of her comfort zone. Here she's at Dorothy's house, so she's doing the public confrontation, and there the people turn against her because they can reach her. And we also see the climax of the story is in the witch's castle, her place of power. So we've got all kinds of different options. But when they go out and battle in public, that's the time that the Daylight Society has to face all that they've condemned and thrown out by making this person a villain. We discussed the relationship with the mother, who's symbolized by the anima, the relationship with the father. Basically, the villain kills him. The hero gets rid of the father tyrant, sometimes by killing him, but quite often by understanding him, facing him, accepting him. Anakin saves Vader and turns it back to the light. Well, when Vader faces his mentor, Obi-Wan, he just kills him. And on the left, that's Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones, who is particularly evil because, yes, he kills his father. And the metaphor here is Mordred, the young man who grows up and topples the weak ruler. And yes, other nasty rulers might kill the son figure. And this is a metaphor for becoming the new head of the household and reconfiguring their society the way he wants to. After this, he can pursue his vision into the future. Thanos does this. Yeah. I vaguely mentioned this, but now let's look at it a little more. The journey is best looked at as part of the life cycle. The hero's journey, top right, is the child is born, gets his father's sword, goes out, and becomes the new king. King Arthur takes the throne. And that means he has become a symbolic adult. He gets married. He becomes the all-powerful king. And once he's become the all-powerful king, the power starts to corrupt. Likewise, Medea, the sweet princess that Jason meets, and the two of them get the golden fleece together. That would be the hero's journey. Then he takes her home, marries her, she kills his uncle to make him the new king, killing a father figure, and the two of them become king and queen and have some babies, and you'd think they'd live happily ever after. And that's usually where the story stops. However, this story keeps going, and we're on that threshold of adulthood, but then we sink into not only power, but evil power. Becoming the king or queen corrupts the character and makes the character more tyrannical, until we've got the powerful Medea queen killing her own children and becoming a fully fledged villain. So that's the catch. This is the life cycle, but where do we start telling the story? Usually, as I said, we stop the hero's story when he becomes king or queen, and we start the villain when the villain has already been made, is already the tyrant king at the heart of the power. But for other stories, we see Anakin corrupt, and we see the young hero on top of the world, married, as powerful as he can get, and then saying, to get more power, I'm going to have to corrupt myself. I think I'll do that. And then falling into the dark side of the circle. So we've got this tyrant king at the height of his power, Vader destroying whatever he wants and living on his giant spaceships and so on and so forth. And then we've got, I could put this right at the bottom there, the confrontation with the young hero, Luke, who sometimes pushes the villain back toward goodness, if we're doing the full cycle. Medea, after she kills her own children, realizes what she's become and she steps back. And what do both these characters do? They give up the power. They say enough. They step away from the throne. Medea becomes a priestess in obscurity. Vader chooses death. He stops the Emperor and then he chooses death. Vader doesn't get to retire. He goes straight to being a Force ghost who advises Luke the other way. But if we're doing the full life cycle, this character retires and then becomes the mentor grandfather figure, the Obi-Wan figure. And no, Obi-Wan does not become completely corrupted and be a Dark Lord in this cycle. So many characters do one part of the cycle lightly or not at all, but this is the full life cycle stages. So after the height of the villainy, where does the character go from there? Well, quite often in our fiction, the character is killed off, the end, bye-bye. But if we're doing the full story, the character gets to retire, step away from power, pass on the torch, and become a mentor to the next generation of heroes, and then fade away further and become a spirit guardian. The best example I can think of is Star Wars yet again with the Force Ghosts, who continues to advise and inspire from beyond the grave. And of course, this retirement goes with turning back to the light, coming back to the good side. And I didn't fully cover this. This is a big Joseph Campbell hero's journey thing, but we've got the everyday world, which is the world where you're supposed to behave, follow the rules, be a good girl or a good boy, do what you're supposed to do. But the unconscious world, the dark side, going out into the deep dark forest, that's where the power of the unconscious rules, and sometimes that's where the villain rules. Alrighty. So, at that moment of total darkness, the villain, again, sometimes is killed. Okay. Hero stabs him, it's over. But other times, the villain has an epiphany and realizes what he's become and steps away from the evil. Christmas Carol is obviously the giant epiphany story where the bad guy is taken to his grave and goes to Christmas future and steps away. I've got the moment where Leia and Rey bring Kylo Ren back to the light. I've got the moment where Spike quests to get a soul to become good, and all in one burst of light, poof, he has turned from a minor villain into a good guy. Snape was absolutely on the path to become a Dark Lord, but when Lily is threatened, his one true love, he changes in a snap. No, this is not what I'm going to be. If Lily is in danger, I will do anything to save her, including be good. And Huntsman Winter's War up top yet again, when all these characters are having a big confrontation, our Queen in Silver up front realizes that she was tricked and lied to make her a villain in the first place, and she flips and realizes the young love of the two heroes over there is what she values, and her destroyed life, being mentored by her evil sister, is not what she wants. So again, not all stories, but if we're doing a full cycle and we keep going, the villain is going to realize what he's become and step down. Or perhaps he'll die. Some of the characters do not redeem, they just get killed off at that moment of epiphany. Anakin, of course, does not die, but is shattered down to a limbless body, basically stuffed into the black armor. And I specifically wanted to put Frollo's death up there, that's second from the left, because he does have a very, very brief epiphany as he's clinging to Notre Dame, his church, that he's always said he is being righteous and doing what the church wants. This is the Hunchback of Notre Dame, where he's persecuting anybody who's different, of course. But in the moment of his death, it's the church that turns on him and kills him. So he has 1 second to realize that, no, actually, you have not been doing God's will. The church hates you. And then he falls to his Disney villain death. The hero quite often is questing for the treasure, grabs the treasure, and runs off with it at his moment of success. And clearly, I thought I would throw Gollum in here because Gollum's entire story is grabbing the ring, escaping with the ring, and going off and hiding somewhere. That is his plot moment over and over and over, or running after it if somebody else has grabbed it. And this is interesting because, of course, Gollum's death is he finally gets his treasure, and he escapes with his treasure, and he gets his moment of epiphany, but it all goes down to death. Oops. But the escape with the treasure can absolutely happen in some of these stories. The hero's journey is about the hero goes down into darkness, faces his dark side, and comes out understanding how a dark side works and realizing that he can harness this power. In Alice in Wonderland 2010, she apprentices with the Red Queen, and the Red Queen teaches her to rule, to be tougher, and then she comes back from her experience with that in her tool belt. That's the classic hero's journey. As I said, we've got villains growing up side by side with the hero. We've got villains who are secure in their total power, and then this little innocent voice shows up and says, oh my gosh, what have you become? And the villain often changes. Well, if we're doing the full villain's journey, then the villain incorporates these skills into the self and can wield hero powers, which make the villain more understanding, more multifaceted, more capable with both hero and villain powers under his belt. And the best example I could think of was Good Omens, a delightful story about an angel and a demon who are best friends. And it's a very close friendship as they're aware they're on opposite sides. And only in the show, they understand each other so well that at the climax, they switch roles and are using each other's mannerisms and pretending to be the other in order to stay safe. And that is an absolute, I understand the other side so well that I can use all their tools for myself. Next to them, we've got Battlestar Galactica, which starts out as good humans and evil robots, but the two sides are learning from each other, working together, getting closer and closer, pretending to be each other, teaming up, falling in love, to the point where they're using each other's skills in a real partnership by the end, and they all end up settling down together when they realize they're on the same side after all. After Kylo Ren is brought back from the dark, we see him and Rey fighting side by side, not only as perfect partners, but using their understanding of dark as well as light to take down the Emperor, to fully understand, to fully accept all sides of themselves, and thus be more perfect warriors. And we've got Maleficent, who again, arguably in her movie is not that villainous, playing with ruling the good side, ruling the bad side, entering the human world for short amounts, and this is all accomplished through her shadow daughter, Aurora, who again is the force of goodness in her darkness, and they work out a real family partnership and thus are working together, with Aurora bringing Maleficent back into the human world and into the light. And so that's the full villain's journey. As I said, the book The Villain's Journey is coming in 2021, and I have written many, many things on the hero's journey and heroine's journey, and Star Wars journey specifically, and lots of superheroes. So it's not a very popular story. It's getting more popular, but there's really interesting insights that you could use to add a lot of depth to your villain. Thank you.